In the Jordan Valley, archaeologists dug into a mound that had been burned so hot the pottery melted into glass. No war does that, no siege does that, and when they dated the layer, the number that came back made half the team uncomfortable. This is the story of el-Hammam, and it's also a story about what happens when a sensational headline outruns the evidence behind it. Stay with me, because both halves of this story matter. Let's start with the site itself, because it's real, and the destruction layer is real. El-Hammam sits in the southern Jordan Valley, northeast of the Dead Sea, and archaeologist Stephen Collins began excavating there in 2005. It was, in the Middle Bronze Age, one of the largest fortified cities in the entire region, protected by a mud brick rampart more than 4 meters thick and a multi-story palace complex. And then, sometime around 1650 BCE, it stopped. Not gradually, abruptly, and violently, in a single event that left the entire site buried under a thick layer of ash and carbon. Here's what makes that layer strange. Ordinary destruction, a siege, a fire, an earthquake, leaves a signature archaeologists know well. This layer didn't match any of them. Excavators reported pottery shards, with their surfaces melted into glass, mud brick walls vitrified on their outer faces, tiny mineral grains under the microscope showing what looked like shock fracturing, the kind normally associated with extreme, near-instantaneous pressure. Whatever happened here, on the surface it didn't look like the aftermath of an army. It looked like the aftermath of something falling from the sky. In September 2021, a team of 21 researchers led by geophysicist Ted Bunch published their analysis in the journal Scientific Reports, part of the Nature portfolio, but distinct from Nature itself, a distinction that got lost in almost every headline that followed. Their conclusion was dramatic. A Tunguska-scale cosmic airburst, comparable to the 1908 explosion over Siberia, had detonated over the city with roughly 1,000 times the energy of the Hiroshima bomb, generating temperatures they estimated above 2,000 degrees Celsius. And in a single paragraph near the end of a technical paper, they raised a question that turned a niche geology study into a global news story. Could the oral memory of an event like this be the root of the story of Sodom in Genesis 19? The story exploded. Hundreds of news outlets covered it. It was shared tens of thousands of times. And I understand exactly why. Because on its face, it's an extraordinary claim. A scientific paper suggesting the destruction described in one of the most vivid passages in the entire Bible might have left a physical, datable, chemical signature in the ground. Now here's the part of the story most retellings leave out, and I think leaving it out does a disservice to everyone who shared that headline in good faith. Almost immediately, other scientists started checking the work. A microbiologist named Elizabeth Bick, who specializes in detecting image manipulation in published research, found that photographs in the paper appeared to have been rotated and altered to align with the direction the authors needed for their blast model to work. Separately, in 2022, geologists Scott Jarrett and Scott Harris published a formal critique arguing the mineralogical evidence presented didn't actually support the extreme pressures and temperatures the paper claimed. And in 2025, physicists Mark Bosloff and Ari Bruno, an impact physics specialist and an author on the original Tunguska research the paper leaned on, published an analysis arguing the comparison itself was built on a misreading of the Tunguska data. The pressure built for years. And on April 24, 2025, Scientific Reports did something journals rarely do. They fully retracted the paper. Not a correction. A retraction, the most serious action a journal can take, meaning the editors concluded the central claim was, in their words, not sufficiently supported by the data presented. A group of anthropologists writing for the science publication Sapiens went further, calling the entire airburst hypothesis pseudoscience, and raising a real concern I hadn't considered before researching this. Viral archaeological claims like this one, they argued, can actually encourage illegal digging at vulnerable Middle Eastern sites by people hoping to find their own piece of a sensational story. So where does that leave us? Here's what I won't do. I'm not going to tell you the destruction layer isn't real, because the excavation itself and the fact that something catastrophic happened at this city around 1650 BCE isn't what got retracted. What got retracted was one specific explanation for it: the cosmic airburst, and the reasoning used to connect that explanation to Tunguska and to Genesis. Conventional explanations, an unusually intense fire fueled by stored oils and grains, localized volcanic or seismic activity, are still on the table, and honestly, so is the possibility that we simply don't yet have a fully satisfying account of what happened there. There's a second question tangled up in all of this that the airburst headlines mostly buried, and it's worth pulling back out. Is Tall el-Hammam even Sodom? That identification is Stephen Collins's own proposal based on his reading of the geographical clues in Genesis, and it's a minority position. For most of the 20th century, the leading candidates for the biblical cities of the plain were two other sites, Bab edh-dhra and Numirah, near the southeastern shore of the Dead Sea, which also show dramatic Bronze Age destruction layers, and which fit a more traditional reading of where Genesis places these cities. Serious scholars disagree, genuinely, about which geography the text actually describes. That debate predates the airburst paper by decades, and it hasn't been resolved by it. Here's the honest place I land on this one, and it's not the place the original headlines wanted you to land. Something violent and unusual did happen at Tall el-Hammam. We don't fully know what caused it. Whether it's Sodom is a real, open question among people who've spent their careers on this region, not a settled fact you can hang a sermon on. And the specific study that made this story famous failed the most basic test science is supposed to pass: other people checking the work. I think that's actually the more useful lesson here than any single artifact would have been. The instinct to want physical, dramatic proof for Scripture is completely understandable, but that instinct is exactly what makes stories like this one spread faster than the correction ever does. A retraction gets a fraction of the shares the original headline got, every single time, on every platform, for every topic. If your confidence in the text needs a retracted paper to hold it up, that confidence was standing on the wrong thing to begin with. The text has survived a lot longer than any single archaeology headline, and it'll survive this one too. If you want the channel that tells you when the exciting version turned out to be wrong, and not just the channel that tells you when it's right, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.